You were 100% right on the Mueller report. Give us an update on what's going on.
Well, right now, the Attorney General is going through the 400-page report. We're told it's 400 pages. I haven't seen it yet, John. And he is going to release, I'm sure, the vast majority of it. He'll have to keep out certain things that the law requires, like classified material and grand jury material, although you can probably work around that and find other ways to describe it. And maybe things that have to do with some innocent third parties. I don't know. But I think you're going to get the full explanation of Mueller. I think you're going to see no collusion of any kind, which raises the question, why do we have this investigation in the first place? And that's a very good question, which I'm kind of working on the answer to. I don't think it just happened accidentally. I think it was the product of you want to call it a political dirty trick or you want to call it a crime. I don't know, criminal conspiracy. But in any event, I think the collusion will leave that question open. How did this come about? And then the obstruction, I think the facts are going to be pretty much undisputed, maybe a few little differences here and there. There may be a different interpretation of what constitutes obstruction. I mean, they've had some crazy ideas like his tweeting could be obstruction or his firing Mueller could be obstruction. I don't know how you can obstruct if you can fire a guy under the Constitution. And you got about 10 reasons to do it, including an IG's report that finds him guilty of all kinds of ethical violations. But there are some people on his staff, on Mueller's staff, that were extremely partisan Democrats, strong Hillary supporters. They have extreme prejudice against the president. I mean, one of them was texting out how much he hated him. So I expect to see a few problems here and there, but nothing that can't be answered. And the ultimate conclusion is there are no indictments for collusion, for obstruction, and there's no claim that you can prove a case of collusion or obstruction against the president. So that's far different than the crazy New York Times headlines of a year ago. There's going to be impeached.
Now, Attorney General Barr seems to be quite different than Attorney General Sessions. And I guess he feels that America is demanding justice, that you should look into where all these theoretical allegations came from.
Well, of course he should, and there's nothing partisan about it at all. I mean, actually, the Democrats for years have had the benefit of a double standard. You know, Hillary committed every crime you could possibly imagine. If anybody's thinking about obstruction of justice for President Trump, look, he didn't destroy 33,000 emails. He didn't have his cell phones, crushed to death with hammers, and he didn't bleach his servers so nobody could see what was on them. I mean, that's what we call obstruction. Firing your FBI director is not obstruction. It's carrying out your duties as the President of the United States. So I think all Bill Barr is reacting to is the double standard that exists. There are some things here that cry out for prosecution. I mean, the conflict of interest between Bruce Orr, who was in the Justice Department, kind of spearheading this investigation, and his wife, who was making money from the company who was pushing the investigation, like a company was getting $1 million. That's like a direct violation of Section 1001. Section 208 of the 18 United States Code, conflict of interest. I put people in jail for that. Cohen testifies in front of Cummings, who says, I'll throw the book at you. And he says he's telling the truth. And then he says, I never asked for a job. I think you know that Cohen asked for a job, John. Everybody in New York knows he asked for a job. And he's on audio tape.
He wanted to be chief of staff.
Yeah, I could call 1,000 witnesses in New York. Either they heard it or probably hearsay. They heard it from somebody else. But in any event, he's also on tape, just in case you're in doubt about it, telling Chris Cuomo he wants to be chief of staff. He testified under oath after being warned not to lie. Well, why did he do that? Because he knew Cummings would let him get away with it. You can do anything, say anything, commit any crime if you're going after Trump. If you're, destroying your emails, well, then if you're destroying your emails, you can get away with that. But if you're Trump, you can't get away with anything, and he shouldn't get away with anything. He hasn't done anything wrong.
I understand Friday morning there was an indictment, or there was one of President Obama's counsels at the White House. Have you heard about it yet?
Yes, I think The gentleman who indicted was a counsel to President Obama, and he was indicted for his involvement in Ukraine, and I guess lobbying the Obama administration and not reporting it, and also lying about it. So I don't know what that amounts to, but I can tell you, John, the thing that interested me is Ukraine. There's a developing story here about the Ukraine that involves how a lot of maybe the genesis of this investigation took place there. And there are some figures involved in it, like our ambassador and some very partisan Democrats and some people who were involved in creating evidence. So this is according to the Ukrainian prosecutor general. And although, of course, it doesn't get reported in the American media, except maybe The Hill and a few other places, but the Ukrainian prosecutor general has opened up an investigation of Democratic interference on part of the Democratic Party by Ukrainian nationals, which is precisely what this collusion charge was with the Russians. It turned out not to be true. Problem here is, I think there's a lot of documentary evidence that it may be true. I don't know who it involves, but I think stay tuned for that. And I don't know that's what Barr was referring to, but it may be. He seemed pretty certain that he had a basis for opening an investigation. And he also seemed pretty certain that there were real questions about the validity of those affidavits for the FISA warrants.
Now, Mayor Giuliani, has anybody determined yet why Sessions was so standoffish? And did they have pictures of him with women or something, or what happened?
I don't think so. No. I don't think so. I know I've heard that joke, but that is not true. Jeff Sessions, whatever issues there are with Jeff Sessions, he's an extremely moral and decent man. I don't know, John. Maybe he was just over his head. An Attorney General of the United States is maybe, I don't know, probably one of the most difficult jobs next to being president. I worked for two attorneys general, worked for one of them directly, Bill Smith, in the Reagan administration. You need a guy of extraordinary intellect, tremendous moral courage. Barr really fits the bill. The guy is a super lawyer. He's a great guy, a good person. You love him, a great guy, normal guy. And he's got ethics that, they're not going to... Everybody questioning him should have his ethics. Let's put it that way. I'm watching some of these congressmen question him, who I've seen lie, and they're questioning a guy that I know doesn't lie. It gets a little annoying.
Mayor, every American really, really believes that regardless of Democrats, regardless of Republicans, the Justice Department has to have justice for both parties, regardless of the party, for all Americans. Do you believe that we're going to go back on track again?
We better, John. It sure was that way when I was a U.S. attorney. That'd be in the 80s during the Reagan administration. Prosecuted Republicans and Democrats. It didn't matter to me. I never cared what you were. If you committed a crime, you committed a crime. If you didn't, I sure wasn't going to persecute you. I remember once people came to me in the middle of the 1984 election. They wanted me to open an investigation of Geraldine Ferrara's husband based on evidence that had been lying around for years, and a lot of it sounded like gossip. But probably if there wasn't an election, I'd open the investigation. And I threw them out of my office. I said, no, I'm not going to have my office used in August or September of an election year for an investigation that I can't possibly complete before the election, and one that certainly isn't some kind of an emergency crime that has to be looked at right now. And I don't remember what happened to that, but it never turned into a federal case, that's for sure. But those were the kinds of ethics that I was taught, and I wasn't unusual. The Democratic U.S. attorneys had the same view. Comey really screwed this thing up with what he did with Hillary. I mean, you can't justify his conclusion that no reasonable prosecutor would have prosecuted for obstruction of justice. As I said, she destroyed things. That's classic obstruction of justice, not firing a person who works for you when you have the constitutional duty to make sure that the laws are faithfully executed.
Mayor, last question. There's some state attorney generals or DAs, especially in New York, that are trying to go after President Trump. And that almost sounds like double jeopardy, but I understand the states are separate and they can do what they want. How do you view that?
Well, I think Letitia James basically disqualified herself from investigating President Trump by announcing that she was going to do it and go after him when she was running for office more aggressively than anybody. You don't run for office as Attorney General or District Attorney in order to go after, what is this, Les Miserables? I mean, you don't run for office to go after one man. And we don't search an entire man's life in order to find something wrong with him. Nobody would ever be president if you did that. I mean, okay, if there's an allegation of a crime, investigate it. But you don't go just open up a man to grand jury investigation or prosecutorial investigation for his whole life. And that's what they've done to him. And I tell you, he's withstood that scrutiny unbelievably. I'm not sure most of those politicians would be able to withstand it. I mean, I know Donald Trump for 30 years, and I know that there's a big myth about him. The fact is, this guy conducts business fair and square. I've seen it, and I don't know what they're looking for. I don't know what they're looking for, but it's not right. It shouldn't be done. We have a statute of limitations in this country, usually 5-6 years. They're going back 10, 11, 12, 13 years. They haven't found anything. They're probably not going to find anything. I know they're not. I'm afraid they'll manufacture something. Look, they manufactured the case in the Southern District. Those payments to people making the allegations against him, which constantly get referred to as hush money. God almighty, boy, I'm not allowed to talk about my experience as a lawyer, but I made settlements like that. They're called settlements, John. Anybody in business does them, and usually you have a non-disclosure agreement with them. It's common. It would be malpractice if you didn't do it as a lawyer. Unfortunately, he had Cohen as a lawyer who screwed it up completely because Cohen screwed up everything he touched and then lied about it. But the reality is there's nothing wrong with those. It's done all the time. It is not a campaign contribution. Otherwise, everybody with lawsuits against them would run for office, take their campaign money, and pay their lawsuits off with it. It's a personal expense, even if it happens the day before an election. So that is a manufactured case in order to try to find something else. Just like the collusion thing, you're going to find out, John, the collusion thing was manufactured. It was made up.
Agreed. America's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani, thank you for your common sense. Thank you for coming on our show and telling
Thank you, John.
American people. And we'll catch up soon.
Anytime.
Thank you.